Instead of killing one thing at a time, why don't you just kill everything? I know some people love their bonk hammer because it does give you a little bit of heal when you throw it at something, but if you're scared of putting your knees and fist into something, please pause this video and find one of my warlock or hunter builds. Use those and have some fun. For my true titans who are ready to put their knees, their fist and teeth into the bowels of the enemies, let me take you through how this is gonna work. I'll start by clearing up one thing about these two melee abilities in terms of which one is better. Shoulder Charge does 15% more damage than the bonk, and it also ignites enemies and kills. So if we're talking about just damage, Shoulder Charge is just better. And by the end of this video, I'm hoping to not just convince you to do this for Solar, but on Arc and Void as well. For exotics, we have a few options to increase our melee damage even further. Heart of Immortal Light, Syndoceps, Peregrine Greaves, and Worm God Caress. I use Syndoceps because it gives that big energy, but I'll still explain why I don't use the other three. Heart of Immortal Light works well when you use all your abilities like Barricade and Grenade, and for this I want to focus mostly on punching, so I can't use that. For Worm God, you have to continuously get kills on a 5-second timer, and since we're killing everything, you rarely have the damage buff when you're trying to get the next set of kills. So we're left with Peregrine Greaves and Syndoceps. Here it's very simple. Peregrine Greaves only gives extra damage on airborne hits, and Syndoceps gives all your melees a 200% increase in damage while you're close to 3 or more enemies. And just like the surrounded spec mod on weapons, it lasts for a few seconds after you're no longer surrounded, so it just works way better. How do we make everything go boom and have maximum uptime on our melees? With the new update to our light subclasses, Titans have an aspect on each subclass that allows you to have a charged melee effect without actually having your melee charged, which means you can get melee buffs and use it with mods like Charge with Light and Elemental Wells, and since we're using Syndoceps, that melee just slaps, so we don't even need the bonk hammer. We'll be starting with the Solar subclass. For the super, it doesn't really matter what you choose. I use Hammer of Soul, but you can use Burning Maul if you prefer it. For aspect, I use Soul Invictus and Roaring Flames. Roaring Flames further increases our damage with any ability kill, and Soul Invictus reduces ability cooldowns, burns enemies within it, and provides restoration to start health generation. For fragments, we'll use Ember of Blistering. It gives grenade energy on ignition kills. Since Shoulder Charge causes ignition, it's the perfect fragment to use. We also use Ember of Eruptions to increase the radius of our ignitions. Ember of Char increases the amount of scorch stacks we apply, and it gives plus 10 discipline, so that's an added bonus. The last fragment we have is Ember of Searing, which gives melee energy when you kill scorched targets, and gives plus 10 recovery to help with our survivability at the same time. So on the screen right now, I have the subclass set up for Solar. If you want to pause and take a screenshot, you can. I'll also have dim links in the description in case you just want to get it right into your Destiny item manager. Void works really similar to Solar, except instead of Solar Ignitions, we get Void Detonations. But the super, I use Word of Dawn, and anything that walks into my bubble gets Schlack. The Shoulder Charge for Void is called Shield Bash, and it's pretty good. It suppresses enemies within the radius you hit and gives you an overshield when you kill the enemy. You then use that overshield with the aspects to create infinite detonations. For aspects, I use Controlled Demolition, which causes all our Void abilities to apply volatile, which then causes the detonations which heal us and kills everything. The other aspect is Offensive Bulwark, and increases the melee damage, gives faster grenade recharge while you have an overshield, and extends the overshield timer with melee final blows. And let's not forget that this also increases our damage on top of the damage increase we get from Syndoceps. I use Vortex Grenades with Echo of Remnants, which allows our Vortex Grenades to last longer. Echo of Undermining weakens enemies but also costs minus 20 of our discipline, but we get higher recharge rates on our grenades while we have overshield, so it doesn't really matter that much. Plus, we just want to melee stuff anyways. Next fragment is Echo of Reprisal, which gives additional super energy on kills while surrounded. The last fragment will be Echo of Legion, which gives us grenade energy on melee kills while also giving plus 10 resilience to help with survivability. And I also have on screen the full subclass setup for Void. For Arc, things get a little different because now it's not about explosions, but more about the ability to do consistent damage to a large group while blinding them and moving. Fastest boy! Again, the super choice is up to you. I use Thunder Crash for single target DPS and Feast of Havoc in more ad-clear situations. For aspects, I use Knockout because it is what gives the melee effect while you don't have your melee charged. It also increases your melee damage like we had on Solar and Void, and it gives health regen on melee kills. The other two aspects are interchangeable though, so we have the Juggernaut Shield that gives a safe way for you to close distance between fights, while Touch of Thunder improves your Storm Grenade that does a good amount of support damage. I personally prefer Juggernaut cause
I'm the Juggernaut!
For fragments, I use Spark of Shock, Resistance, and Recharge. Shock allows your grenades to apply jolt, resistance increases damage resist while surrounded, and recharge increases ability regen also while you're surrounded. If you're using any of these builds and you're not constantly surrounded, you're doing it all wrong. My full subclass for this is on screen right now. Take a screenshot if you want, but like I said before, there's a link in the description if you just want to copy and paste into Destiny Item Manager. If you're wondering what guns would work well with this build, now I know you've not been paying attention. Just punch everything. But I'll still give you some options because, I mean, you do have to equip some weapons. So these are my options for Solar and Void. Any weapons I suggest for Arc will just make you shoot too much. For Solar, I use the Callus Mini tool with Grave Robber and Incandescent. It drops in the containment activity on the moon if you're trying to get one of those, and it's also craftable. For Void, I use Deliverance with Demolitionist and Repulsor Brace. It drops in the Duality Dungeon, and the main benefit for this is you can use the Repulsor Brace perk to get an overshield while you're killing enemies that are affected either with the suppression from your shield bash or the weaken effect from the fragment. Since we're done with the subclass setup for all three subclasses now, let's get into the mods. For this build, I like to keep it really simple. If you're the kind of person who likes to spice things up, I have a few options for you at the end as well. I use Melee Well Maker because it gives you the most bang for your buck when it comes to melee kills. This goes well with Bountiful Wells to increase the number of wells I make on each kill to 2. Then I use one more Melee Well Maker mod to increase the number of wells I generate to 3. This, with all the aspects and fragments from the different subclasses, usually gives me about half of my melee energy back, and then I run this with Heavy Handed, which gives half my melee back whenever I use my charge melee while I'm charged with light. To get charged with light though, I use Elemental Charge, which turns each well into 2 stacks of charge with light. I know that might have been a little bit hard to follow, but the simple version is I use Melee Well Maker to generate a bunch of wells, and then I use Elemental Charge to turn those wells into charge with light, and then that in turn gives me half my melee back every time I use my melee. Now for the people who like to switch things up for each subclass, you can replace one Melee Well Maker mod with different mods to spice things up. For Arc, you could use Well of Aeons to increase your melee damage even more. For Void, you can use Well of Tenacity to increase your damage resistance to make you even more Juggernaut. And for Solar, you can use Well of Ordnance to increase your grenade recharge. Last thing we're going to talk about today is stat distribution. If you're still here, please put a hashtag Magnifico in the comments, because you're amazing for getting this far with me and I appreciate it. I'll leave you a heart sign as well when I see it, just so you know that I did. The two most important stats are resilience and recovery. Get these two as high as you can and then run some discipline. You can get your grenades pretty often since we're making so many wells. So, my fellow titans, embrace your inner titan and stick your in the of your enemies and show them just how big your is. Oh, real New Year, so right.